Hello there, it's your friend Phil, project management trainer and coach. We got a great question from Andrew, one of our students via YouTube, and he says regarding this video that we put out there on ITTO advice, if you take a look at the video and look at the comments, you'll see Andrew's comments. He says, "Thanks a lot. I'm confused on one thing. Some of the project management actually included the information required later." So I believe he means some of the project management processes contain some outputs that are only used later. That's what he's referring to. He says, for example, the risk management plan has the probability and impact matrix inside before identify risk. Human resource plan has staff management plan that has staff acquisition before acquire project team, and recognition and rewards before develop project team. Why do they need to do the same thing? Sounds to me. Sorry for asking this question, but my mind cannot clear it up. So Andrew, this is a very good question, and it just shows me that you are actually reasoning below the initial level or the initial layer that most people are exposed to. At the beginning, a lot of students see tools, techniques, inputs, and outputs, and they just take them and cram them. But you're going a step further to ask why. Why do I see in my risk management plan this, and I'm not using it until later? So I'm going to explain this to you. And to do that, I'm going to show you one of the tools that our students use. Now, this tool, a lot of people have been asking for it, but this is part of PMI's IP. We cannot just distribute this material without you going through a proper channel. So it's not freely available. It's only available to our students who are signed up for our course that is registered with the PMI. So those of you who've been asking for this tool, unfortunately, we cannot just make that available to you like that without going through the proper channel, which is our course. Okay, it's part of PMI's IP, but I'm going to use it to explain Andrew's point. So if you go to the risk section over here, you can see that the risk management plan is an output of plan risk management. Okay, right here as I'm pointing. See that? Now, this risk management plan that Andrew is alluding to, it contains a lot of things. It contains your definition of impact scales that will help you understand what is a high risk, what is a low risk, what is a medium risk in terms of probability or impact. It also contains the format of the probability and impact matrix. That's what he's talking about. So he's like, why am I seeing all this here? And then when I go down to, for example, perform qualitative risk analysis, I now see probability and impact matrix. That's really the question he's asking. So Andrew, let's explain this in a little bit more detail for you. You have plan risk management. However, in plan risk management, you are only planning how you're going to manage risks or how you're going to identify risks. Part of your planning the how means coming out with your plan. This is your risk management plan. Okay? You need to have a plan, Andrew. You can't just start plowing down the road of risk management without first having a plan. Now, this risk management plan contains a format for how you're going to carry out other processes. This is really your how. Your how. Okay? Now, your how needs to contain details of templates to be used, the formats of those templates, so on and so forth. So in this document here, we have the format. We need to agree on the format up front now before we actually begin to use those things. So we talk about the format of the register, for example. We talk about the format of the scoring of the risks. We talk about the format for the categories. So we need to do this up front, Andrew. We need to do this now before we get to where we actually need to use this stuff. So there's a difference. There's a difference between planning versus doing. What you are working on in plan risk management is the planning. This is the how. And then after you get all of these things defined, what your register will look like, what the scoring model would be, what the categories of the risks would be, then you go into the doing. And to do the doing, guess what? You need the format as an input. Or you need the tools that you've decided upon as a tool and technique. So let me give you another picture here to make it even clearer. Because when you think about these things, you have to think about planning versus executing. Planning and executing could contain the same topics, the same surrounding information, but in one process, all you're doing is planning. You're not doing. You know, PMI are very particular about planning versus doing. So this is planning, and this is doing. Okay? Planning, like plan risk management, the doing, carrying out the plan, part of this you actually do in identify risk, for example. Part of this you do in perform qualitative and perform quantitative. See? Perform qualitative risk analysis and perform quantitative risk analysis. They all use this risk management plan as an input to all of these things. You see? Now, just because we use them in these processes doesn't mean that we have to only decide upon them when we're using them. That will not be very proactive. Think about it. If you did not think about how you were going to identify risk until you got to identify risk, that would not be as proactive. Because there needs to be a separate discussion about how we're going to identify risks versus the actual identification of risks. Does this make sense, Andrew? I'm hoping it does. Let's take the other one that you mentioned here. So here you say the risk management plan has probability and impact matrix inside. So we talked about that. Human resource plan has staff management plan that has staff acquisition, probably means staff release plan or the plans for acquiring the team. I get what you mean. All right. So if we take a look at that one as well, it's pretty much the same thing, Andrew. the PMI have a dedicated process for planning. You see, in planning, you're not yet doing, you're just doing that, just planning. Let's see, plan human resource management. This is where we plan how we're going to acquire the team, how we're going to develop them, how we're going to reward them, how we're going to release them back into whichever department they were in. It depends, right? But this is where we come out with a plan, a human resource management plan. This is not where we are doing. This is where we're planning. So nobody's acquiring the team at this point. Nobody's developing the team. Nobody's managing the team. But the moment you get into doing, which really is executing, okay? This is really executing. When you get into executing, at this point, you begin to acquire the team based on your plan, right? You begin to develop them and reward them. Reward them recognition, right? You begin to develop the team. How do you know how to develop the team? It's from your human resource management plan. But you don't want to wait till you get to develop project team before you actually plan how you're going to do it. So the name of the game is pretty much all about intentionality. You have to be intentional, right? First, planning, and then doing. What about managed project team? Same thing. How am I going to manage my team? It's in the plan. Am I going to wait till I get here before I plan? No, I need a plan up front. Okay? You also ask about rewards and recognition, which I believe I've answered for you. So your question is, why do they need to do the same thing? They don't do the same thing. They don't. They may talk about the same thing. You see, this one is talking about how, and this one is actually doing. You see, and there is a difference. And I'm glad you're asking this question because I'm sure a lot of people have the blurred understanding of what am I really doing in planning. Planning is just that. It's coming out with a document or some sort of method for carrying out a process. All of these processes in project management, let's take another knowledge area, for example. Let's take plan schedule management from time management. Plan schedule management. In plan schedule management, you come out with your schedule management plan. Your schedule management plan contains information about how you are going to define the activities, how you're going to sequence them, how you're going to estimate the resources, how you're going to estimate the duration. What measures of duration are you going to use? Are you going to use, hours or months or years? All of that stuff is defined in your schedule management plan. You see, but you don't do any of those things as far as estimating or developing the schedule while you are doing plan schedule management. All you're doing is planning. You see? So when you're done with your plan, at that point, you begin to define the activities. You use your plan again to guide your sequencing. And then your estimating of activity resources, your estimating of activity durations, and the development of the schedule, and ultimately how you're going to control the schedule. All of this stuff is talked about here, but it is not done until you get here, and here, and here, so on and so forth. Okay, I hope that explains the logic to you, Andrew. Let me know if you have any further questions. Thank you.